Welcome to Tales of Fae and Folk, and this time we are going to look at a lovely Yule, Christmas, winter creatures. Some are full of enchantment, some a little scary, but all wonderful characters from winter folklore. Today we will be looking at Befana, Snegurochka, Frau Holle and Goddess Skaadi and Beira. Winter is a time of darkness, sleep, fireside tales, and keeping the night creatures out of the home. And yet it is also a time of hope and feasting, a celebration of friends and family and human company. From these meetings come stories, a sharing of folklore, and a revisiting of the old tales. In this episode, we are going to look at some of the female characters that may visit us during Yule or the Christmas season. Befana. Befana can be found in Italy, now seen as a grandmotherly character looking like a classic witch on a broomstick, but once there was a darker look, ugly and misshapen, and burned as effigies. It is believed her name is derived from the Festa dell'Epifania, Epiphany, and this eventually became Befana. It is she who comes at Epiphany Eve, the 5th of January. To the good children she brings toys and sweet treats, but coal, garlic, onions or a stick to the naughty children. She is renowned as a house-proud creature, sometimes sweeping the hearth or floor when she visits. The magic of sweeping away the problems of the year going. Food and a glass of wine is left out for Befana in her honour. As with Santa Claus, she gets into the home through the chimney, and so her costume is black from the soot, and includes her shawl and a broomstick. Of course, Befana does not like to be seen by humans, and those who do try to catch a glimpse of her will receive a thump on the shoulder with the end of her broom. Cute little doll versions of Befana can be bought in Italy to display in the home. Jacob Grimm, one of the famous folktale collecting brothers, made a note that she was a misshapen fairy, dark and ugly, and associates her with Frau or Holle. All of these Yule creatures, he noted, have similar folktales and songs, and all come from the mountains and live in caves. To add to the evidence for this shared mythology is the town of Barga in the Italian Alps, of course close to Austria with their mountainous borders. Here the town is also known as Città della Befana, and the customs of her festival here are beautifully preserved. Here a person costumed as Befana, witch-like with an entourage of carol singers known as Befanotti, visit the houses. These followers are dressed in rags and traditional peasant-style clothing. Their faces are blackened to mimic soot and represent the ancestor ghost of the town people. Despite obvious pagan origins, as is so often the case, Christian mythology adopted Befana as part of its Christmas traditions, and so some lovely tales developed to give a backstory to Befana. In one tale, Befana was a simple woman who was approached by the Magi, the 3 wise men or 3 kings, just before the birth of baby Jesus. They needed advice on where to find him, as they were following the star, and yet Befana did not know. However, she did give them a comfortable place to rest for the night, before they carried on with their search. The Magi invited the hospitable and humble woman to come with them on their journey, but Befana, being so careful to keep her home tidy, and with so much cleaning to do, she declined their kind offer. And yet as time passed, she began to regret her decision. She should have gone with them, to see this special little baby. Befana left her home with food and gifts of a broom for the baby and his mother, and went to search for the Magi, but she could not find them anywhere. Instead, she decided to do as they were doing and follow the star. Sadly, though, she still could not find where the Holy Family could be found, and so to this day she carries on her travels, but this time visiting each and every child and leaving her gifts, as every one of them has the goodness of the Christ child within them. In another Christian tale, Befana was a simple woman who adored her child, but this child tragically passed away. In her grief she became insane. On hearing of the birth of the infant Jesus, she convinced herself that this too was her child. She travelled to where he was resting with his family and gave him all her gifts. In return, Befana was given the gift of being the symbolic mother of all the children of Italy. Snegurochka the Snow Maiden. Snegurochka, or Snow Child, is a lovely snow maiden tale from Russia that dates to pre-Christianity also, although there is some debate that she actually only dates back to the 1800s. Her grandfather, Father Frost, being the much older character. In the fairy tale, there was once a hard-working elderly peasant husband and wife who lived in the forest in a simple cabin, and sadly, the couple had no children. They were a generous couple, always ready to help despite their poverty, but they were sad at never having been able to have a child. One day, while collecting wood and kindling for the fire, they fell to talking about their childhoods and how they once loved to make snowmen, and they decided instead to make a little snow girl. Together they worked on the figure. Pretty blue beads were found for her eyes. A little smile was created for her mouth with a piece of red ribbon, and they even gave her sweet dimples. Finally they finished and stood back. "Behold," said the old man, "our daughter Snegurochka." His wife smiled through her tears. At that very moment a crackling sound filled the air, and they looked around to see where the noise was coming from. It was the sound of magic. What they could not know was that the winter spirit, Father Frost, had stopped to watch them working as he passed through the forest, and he saw all of the love they put into the creation of their little snow girl. It made him sad to see them so alone, such good people. He raised his staff and sent a crackle of magic through the air, and it was this sound that they had heard. It was beginning to grow cold and dark, and the old couple sadly said goodbye to their snow daughter, clasped each other's hands and headed off to their cabin and back to the warmth of home. Next day they returned to where Snegurochka had been built from snow. But can you imagine their surprise when instead of a snow girl, there was a real girl, so beautifully dressed in all crystal white, with the palest blonde hair, brilliant blue eyes, a dainty rosebud mouth, and so pretty a maiden that they had ever seen. And she spoke. "If it makes you happy, I have come to be your daughter, and I will look after you as my own mother and father." The old couple took her hands, their hearts filled with an unknown joy, and they guided her to their little home. And there they lived happily for such a long time. She cared for them so kindly, and she loved her cabin home, and yet still somehow she yearned for the woodland and all of its creatures, and so she spent a lot of time there too. As winter arrived, the old couple and their magical daughter stood at the cabin window, watching the visitors to the nearby town pass by. The old couple encouraged Snegurochka to go also. Go and be happy, and enjoy herself at the festival. The girl did this, watching all the happy faces and fascinated at everything. All of this was new to her. As she wandered the town, she caught the eye of a young man, a flute player. He approached her, and as they looked at each other, they both fell deeply in love, and the couple became inseparable. One day she was walking through the forest when a figure approached her. This was Father Frost. He looked at her intensely and warned her that spring was coming, and be very careful with this new relationship, because love was a human thing, and she must stay in the safety of the cold, dark forest. But she loved her bow, and Father Frost watched sadly as she rushed to meet him. Time passed, and winter turned to spring, and Snegurochka would wait to hear the music her true love played on his flute to let her know that he was nearby. At this she would rush to meet him, all thoughts of anything else far from her mind. The music was so beautiful she began to cry as she ran, forgetting completely the warning of wise Father Frost. She ran through the dark and the coolness of the trees and into the clearing where her love was waiting, and as she ran her feet touched a patch of sunlight that filled the place. Her feet began to melt, and after only a moment all of the beautiful girl had disappeared to nothingness. The heartbroken young man took the path to the door of the old couple and told them his tragic news. They were completely heartbroken, all of them, but the couple had always known in their heart of hearts that she could not stay forever because she was only a creature of snow and magic. However, Snegurochka was not totally lost. Father Frost caught her icy spirit as it changed to a breeze and kept it close by him. He took it to his realm in the frozen north, and here she returned to her beautiful human-like form. Here she and her Father Frost stay all the months that are warmer, but as the winds blow cold to the south, they too travel on the winds to visit all the good people as her foster family had been, and all the children to bring them pretty gifts at New Year. The story of Snegurochka became a classic Russian fairy tale, and then also the theme of many plays, books, and also is included in Andrew Lang's Pink Fairy book. Classical music scores, ballets, films, animations, ballads, poems, art, and of course Christmas time, festive celebrations revolve around Snegurochka. In image, she is always portrayed as ever youthful, beautiful with shining blue eyes, cherry red lips, snow white skin, the palest blonde curly or braided hair, and of course being a snow maiden, her costume is traditionally white, but over time colour has also been added to the visage. The outfit can now contain blue or red. She also now is portrayed with a beautiful crown of silver and pearls, or a fur-lined hat. Frau Holle, or Hulda. Now let's look at another winter witchery character, Frau Holle, or Hulda, another female character associated with Frau Perkta. Of course, we have also spoken of Perkta in our tales of La Befana, and the similarities in roots to her also, from the alpine regions of Germany, Austria, and over the border to Italy. Her name root comes from the Germanic huld, meaning gracious, friendliness, kind, and is also found in many other Germanic-based languages such as Danish, English, Middle English, Icelandic, Swedish, and Proto-Indo-European. So her name is ancient and stretches far and wide. She is said to be older than even the pantheon of the Norse gods, an ancient supreme goddess who over time and with the spread of Christianity became a witch-like creature associated with Frau Perkta, a winter figure from the Germanic alpine regions and possibly with some Celtic origin. Holle, the goddess, gathers the spirits of children who have passed away, in this aspect being known as the Dark Grandmother or the White Lady, and her festival time is during the 12 days of midwinter, a time when the veil between worlds is thin and the spirits are around us a little more. Christian folklore has Frau Holle as a weaver and a spinner, again a throwback to a goddess-like aspect, and with this she became associated with witchcraft. In folklore she travels around on a distaff instead of a broom, and is known as a leader of women and female spirits that travel through the night, the Hulda. In the legends, the spirits of the human women would leave their bodies to follow her, travelling and feasting, or even fighting amongst the clouds, their husbands and families none the wiser to their secret lives. Today, and going back into the realms of history, the pre-Christian festivals of Frau Holle and Perkta are carried out mainly in the Alps of Germany, Austria, northern Switzerland. Wild masked revellers swarm the towns and villages, dressed as these winter goddesses or witches, carrying out the winter wild hunt. Of course, her traditions, in many folklore forms, were recorded by the Brothers Grimm, and Hulda is mentioned in many church texts, even mentioned by Martin Luther. Indeed, she is ancient, as are her sister folklore witch goddess characters. How old we cannot possibly know now, but it is wonderful that her traditions and image has come down to us even to this day. There is a really great folk tale of Frau Holle. A widow, rich and comfortable, lived with both her own daughter and her stepdaughter from her deceased husband. As with the Cinderella tale, her own daughter was allowed to be idle and spoiled, the stepdaughter left to do all the chores and all the work. Every day this girl would sit outside her cottage and spin in the fresh air. One day she slipped as she was spinning, and she pricked her finger on the spindle. She rushed, still holding the spindle, to the well to wash her hand of the blood that was now pouring. As she leaned into the well, the spindle slipped from her grasp, and it dropped into the dark water below. In fear, she thought about the punishment she would receive for losing such a precious item, and panicking, she jumped into the well after it. The girl fell and fell and fell, and expected to hit the cold water at any second, of course, but she didn't. Instead, she fell onto a meadow. She raised herself up and walked around. Eventually she found a bread oven, and inside it was full of bread. The bread said to her to take it from the oven so it would not burn. Very carefully she lifted the hot door and took all the bread from the hot oven, arranged the bread carefully and carried on her way. Next she came to an apple tree, and the apple tree asked her to pick its apples as they would rot away and waste. One at a time she picked all of the apples, carefully piled them high, and carried on exploring. Finally she came to an old cottage, and there she met an old woman, and the old woman invited her to stay for a while, but only if she was prepared to help with the housework. This old woman identified herself as Frau Holle. She told the girl she must make sure to puff and plump the feather pillows and the covers as well when she made the beds, as this would make the feathers fly and the sky snow in her human world. And so the girl did this as she was asked, working for this strange old lady, Frau Holle. Time passed by, and the girl was a great help to the old lady, but she was finding that she missed her human world. She confessed this to Frau Holle one day and asked would she ever be able to go home. Frau Holle had seen the goodness of this girl and how much a help she had been, and it was beyond measure. She agreed to show her the way home, and led her to a gate at the edge of her world. As the girl passed through the gate, a shower of gold fell upon her. Frau Holle also gave the girl the spindle that had originally fallen into her world, and then closed the gate behind her. All at once the girl found herself near her home, and she rushed back to tell her stepmother and her stepsister what had happened and where she had been. Of course, this being a folk tale, we sort of know what happens next. Not content with the stepdaughter getting all the riches and the glory, the stepmother decided her own daughter should have the same, if not better. She told her daughter to go and spin by the well. This she did, and then she picked up her spindle and threw it in the well on purpose, and then jumped right in after it. This spoiled girl came to the bread oven where the bread begged to be let out of the heat, and yet she merely turned away and carried on to look for the magical cottage. Next she too came to the apple tree, who begged her for help with all of its apples. She ignored the poor tree and walked right on by. Eventually she came to the cottage of Frau Holle. The old woman offered the same deal to this young woman. She could stay only if she helped her. After all, she was an old lady, and some things she found she just could not do anymore. The girl agreed with a smile, a sly smile, and went into the cottage. However, it didn't take too long before this girl returned to her idle ways. Why should she do all the work? Frau Holle had been watching everything, of course, and the time came when she had had enough. She dismissed the lazy girl from her service. However, she did take the girl to the gate, and as the idle girl passed through, a pan full of pitch tar fell over her, and Frau Holle cackled, "This is what you have earned," and with that she slammed the gate behind her. There is another version called Diamonds and Toads, in which the good girl spills jewels and gold from her lips every time she speaks, and the lazy girl spills toads from her mouth. To be honest, I don't think I would want either. Skaadi. To a powerful Norse goddess now, Skaadi, one of the Jotun frost giants, the goddess associated with hunting by bow, skiing, winter, and mountains. She is spoken of reverently in many of the Norse writings, and she is a fascinating character. She married the god Njord as part compensation for the murder of her father Pjazi. In some legends she leaves Njord and marries again, this time to Odin, this union bringing many children to the divine couple. In the Poetic Edda and Prose Edda, it is she who torments Loki by placing the venom-dripping snake over him as he is bound. It is thought that the name Scandinavia could have its root in her name, or the Old Norse nouns shadow and harm. In this way she seems related to the Irish warrior woman Skaha, whose name meant shadowy one, and of course as a warrior she would have been proficient in bow hunting. This name relationship to shadow carries through many Northern European Germanic languages, including English. Another root association could be the Old Norse Skaadi, meaning harm, damage, which is connected to the Icelandic and Faroese Skaadi, and comes to us in English as scathing or unscathed. In the Poetic Edda, a tale is told of how the god Odin disguised himself, as he often did, this time as Grimnir. He tells young Agnar of 12 places, the 6th being Primheimer. The frost giant Jotun Pjazi once lived here, but now his daughter Skaadi does. In the poem Lokasenna, Skaadi is spoken of as the wife of Njord, who will be attending the feast of Aegir. Loki is there, wagging his tongue and causing mischief in a flyting exchange with Heimdall. Skaadi interrupts this and tells Loki that soon he will no longer be playing the fool, because the gods will bind him to a sharp rock with his own son's entrails. The arrogant Loki scoffs, responding that he was one of the first and foremost at the murder of her father. She replies that if what he has said is the truth, then doom will flow from her lands. Loki further scoffs that she was more friendly when she was in bed with him, something he throws at many of the goddesses to humiliate them in front of others. His attention then turns to another of the goddesses. Further in the Lokasenna, it is told of how Loki is captured by the gods, tied up using the innards of his son Nari and bound to a rock. Another son they transform into a wolf. Skaadi takes a venomous snake and holds it above Loki's face, and Loki's wife Sigyn is made to sit, holding a bowl between the snake and her husband's face to catch the deadly venom. As the venom drips, the bowl fills, and soon she has to turn it to empty it. At this, venom drips onto the face of Loki. He writhes in pain and anger, and this agony causes earthquakes all over the human world. Skaadi then, a winter warrior goddess, not to be messed with, as Loki found out. Beira. Beira can be found in both Ireland and Scotland, with a little spelling difference and lore. She is associated with the Cailleach, the old woman, the hag goddess of storms and winter, ancestral worship, horned animals, and the creation of landscape. So once again a winter character whose history stretches back, who knows how far, prehistory at the very least. In Ireland she is known as the Hag of Beira, in Scotland Beira, Queen of Winter. And so Beira of Scotland, who raised mountains and hills, formed as she strode across the land and dropped rocks from her wicker basket. Or maybe other tales are right and she placed the stones as stepping stones to help her on her way. And she also carries a hammer to hammer out the valleys as well. Donald Mackenzie tells us she was a giantess, one-eyed, white-haired, with dark blue skin and rust-coloured teeth. This Cailleach, this personification of winter, herds deer and goes to battle with spring, her staff freezing the ground where she hits it. Her season is from November the 1st to the 1st of May, so Samhain to Beltane in the pagan calendar. After this the world is ruled by Breda, who rules summer and warmth and a cycle of seasons. In some folklore, as Breda or Brigid takes power from the Cailleach, the old deity returns to stone to await the return of her part of the year. In other folklore, the longest night of the year marked the time she would finish her reign as Queen of Winter, visiting the spring of youth to drink its waters and grow younger as the days passed, until she could reign once more. In both Scotland and Ireland, the first farmer to finish his harvest of grain would make a corn dolly, representing the Cailleach of winter from the last sheaf of the crop. This dolly would be thrown into the farmer who had nowhere near finished. The last farmer to finish would take care of the dolly all winter in his home, and there was fierce competition to take this personification of Beira the Cailleach into their farms. In one tale told of Beira, the blue-skinned, one-eyed hag, she yearns for the love of a hero. If the man would accept her, she would transform into a beautiful, fertile young woman. This tale symbolising the seeds that lie dormant during winter, ready to emerge as plants as the year turns warmer. So a duality. In this tale, Beira is not only winter, but within herself she can turn to the goddess of spring. One cannot be without the other. Beira, as we have said earlier, carries her magical staff as she walks. As winter ends, she throws this staff where the holly and the gorsebush grows. These are her sacred trees, and then she turns to stone and sleeps. Winter has ended for another year. She is also the goddess of death and rebirth, a mirroring of the tale of her spring aspect that comes from winter, seeds lying dormant, death and rebirth, both for the plants and for ourselves. The well or spring of youth is associated a great deal with Beira. Folklore places it in the green island of the west, a floating island of constant summer, full of fruiting and flower-filled trees, appearing in the Atlantic between the Hebrides and Ireland. Although many sailors tried to reach this magical isle, only Beira knew where it was and how to reach it. As the days of the year began to lengthen, Beira would travel to the island where she would sit next to the spring, waiting on the last night of her reign. As the first hint of daylight appeared in the east, and before any bird could do so or before any dog barked, she would drink from the cool, bubbling water. Should she miss being first, she would crumble away to dust and nothing. At her first sip of this magical water, she would start to grow young again, and she would leave the island, return to her land of Scotland, and there she would sleep. Once awake once more, she would be transformed into a beautiful young woman, full of vitality, dressed in green with golden hair, bright-eyed, full of fertility, and now she had become Brigid, the Queen of Summer. As the months of summer pass, though, she ages. At midsummer she was now a full, mature woman. As autumn arrives, wrinkles have furrowed her brow, and her blonde hair has begun to silver. And as winter arrives, she is now once more Beira the hag, the Cailleach, fierce, cold and mighty. Now she is dressed in grey rags, her white hair streaming over her shoulders, a brown shawl pulled around her shoulders, skin blue again, and only one eye to see with. And I think this is a good place to finish, with a mighty goddess full of wisdom and creation and destruction, and creation once again. As we sit in the cold dark of winter, we know in our hearts the first snowdrops or flowers and leaves will bud again soon. It is just time and all of us watching for the signs to appear. I hope you have enjoyed this time's telling of tales, and always keep warm in the winter cold as much as you can. The warmth of my caring is always with you, and may the sun shine upon us all again. Take care, dear friends. Brightest of blessings, and remember, don't play with the fairy folk at any time of the year, or you may end up in one of my folk tales yourself.